we are going back to the topic for the day. And that's true that we have heard lately that we had to invest up to 60, 80 billion euros a year. Part is to be paid by the state, part is to be paid by ourselves, part is to be paid by the companies, up to 30% actually. We are going to discuss all these points, all these issues, and we are very happy to have all the business entities and companies with us today, because they are key players in this matter. Now, in order to get to the core of the matter, I'm going to give the floor to Yann Leriche, who is the CEO of Getlink, that is to say tunnel under the channel and other transportation means. This company is fully aware of the interest of this topic and has decided to create a chair entitled Effectiveness in your scope of activity, and you're going to give some more details on this. Good morning, everybody. At Getlink, part of our activities consists in operating the under the channel transport with Eurotunnel, Europort. We have got all kinds of trains. Of course, we all know of Eurostar, for instance, but there are some other trains. And we want also to play a part in decarbonation. We have quickly reached the conclusion that in order to be useful for the climate, we had to increase our CO2 emissions. That may sound completely mad, but it's easy to understand. Our direct competitors are ferries transporting passengers across the channel, and ferries emit many more carbon, much more carbon than the train under the channel. 73 less for the trains under the channel. So, of course, all the companies are meant to make the best possible efforts in order to decarbonate. But that's why we have been thinking it was necessary to do something in this respect, hence the creation of the chair on this matter, to work together with a view to work together with TSE. Of course, we have to think in terms of regional scope, global scope even. And in the same way as a GPS helps you to locate the place where you are living or going to, the GIEC acts as a kind of a GPS, describing the state of the art. Yet we don't really we know that we are heading to somewhere, to some situation, to somewhere, but we don't know how to get there. And there is a path, and this path can be extremely costly if we don't choose the right path. And we are fully aware, and we really observe that the path is not yet well delineated. We don't really know how to assess the carbon cost and carbon price. We don't have in mind, we don't have all the knowledge about the price of the various types of energy. This is a real issue. So we do have to try and well identify the right path to reach the destination as a kind of defined, delineated by the GIEC, amongst others. Of course, private companies must take a part in this, but meanwhile, they have to make a living. They have to be able to make money. Yet, they have to reduce their carbon footprint, to go on paying their taxes. This will help and finance decarbonation. And I think that the worst greenwashing would be economy bashing, actually. That's my personal opinion, you know. That's the way I feel. And I'm convinced we have to go on working all together. All the stakeholders, all the players, the economists, the academic world have to work together. Eric, you are the CEO of Pierre Fabre, and you are not that bad in terms of carbon emission. But yet it has nothing to do with the major climate concern. Yet, you have long been aware of this problem, of this issue. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary. You know that Laboratoire Pierre Fabre was created by a pharmacist. And he was already aware when setting up business that we had to try and protect nature, because we are part of nature. We are living in nature. That's why it's so important. And that's why he built his company banking on very simple principles and tenets. In the 80s, it was something new to talk about ingredients, traceability. But this is what he started doing. Our turnover was 2 billion turnover end of 2021, with various branches such as cosmetics, just to name one, not to mention drugs, etc. But our company works a lot with natural ingredients, and started doing it from the very start to make sure that there are no chemicals of unknown origin in the product. And this translates in what we call the green mission, embarking the discovery of new natural ingredients with a natural origin, and with the impact, the control of the impact on carbon emissions within the framework of the Paris Agreement's guidelines. That means monitoring water consumption, reducing the carbon footprint 30% by 2030. This is monitored year after year, within the framework of our company, at headquarters level, at branch level, at affiliates level, and we are also doing as much as possible what we can in order to have clean vehicles, etc. We do enhance traceability. We are highly committed to this. And our major stakeholders, one of our major stakeholders is a foundation. It's a capital. Our company has got capital assets whose large percentage, 80%, are owned by a foundation, the foundation Pierre Fabre, actually. And extremely interesting what you are saying. Let me turn to Philippe Ducom, CEO of ExxonMobil in Europe. Thanks very much for being so relaxed when listening to some demonstrators criticizing your company. And thanks very much for being here for accepting our invitation, since you are one of the major players in this sector of activity. It must be very difficult for you to reduce your carbon footprint. Here we are talking about millions of tons. How do you tackle this issue as a major company? Thank you very much for inviting me, for inviting our company. We really wanted to contribute to the debate, and we are at the very center of the issue, at the very center of society activities. We would like to offer sustainable, innovative solutions in order to adjust to societal needs. And when translating this into energy, we have got to take up a twofold challenge. Part of this challenge consists in offering energy, but in a viable, sustainable way. You know that feeds, of course, the economy, but feeds society and its prosperity. But this goes together with GHG emissions, but this doesn't mean we do not share this objective, which consists in reducing carbon emissions. So how to do it? How can we tackle this issue? Students may have different views, different approaches, may disagree with us, but we have got 4 pillars in our strategy. I can tell them. We are willing to decrease our emissions. We are looking at what we are doing and trying to curb some shifts and some trends, to shift some trends and to react to excess carbon emissions. And we are also banking on R&D, which help to reduce the cost of some technologies and to create more innovative and lean ones, and to another aspect of our approach is to participate in the debates, discussions. Our objectives, our goals are concrete, such as carbon neutrality by 2050. This strategy, this ambition relies on roadmaps for each site. 90% of the roadmaps will be available by the end of this year. We will have 100% of them by next year. We have also decided to set up a new branch, low carbon branch. We are going to invest millions of dollars to reduce carbon emissions at our level, at society level, and we are banking on 3 solutions to do this. Well, could we wait a little bit before listening to these solutions? We'll get back to this later in the debate. Would you kindly accept to go back to the capture of carbon? Yes, no problem. I'll do this. But we would like the next speaker, Ms. Dolveck, to tell us more about what's going on at French rail level, at SNCF level, in this respect. And how are you dealing with this problem? Well, climate is at the top of our agenda. there is a consensus and a momentum. The consensus is quite clear. Everybody is saying we have to go for it. Look at the GIEC report, at the Paris agreements. I went to the States to talk to U.S. railways companies. In New York, they have to adapt, adjust the platforms to the fact that the oceans are going to rise up to higher levels. And I'm glad to be here, back into the university where I did part of my studies. Common good wasn't at the center of studies at that time. Now we feel empowered, and the war in Ukraine is an added kind of element which fuels this momentum. In France, we have got 10 million square meters, 3,000 stations, 10 million passengers in one day, and about the equivalent of the French population in one single week. So I'm here at the crossroads between mobility, public transport, and building stations, and marketing. And going back to these three sectors of activities, they do emit over 50% of greenhouse gases. I'm talking about France, of course. I'm going to focus on transport. The goal is to have people traveling on a train. So they have to feel like traveling on a train, going to a station, etc. We have to encourage train transport. We have to multiply the train transportation by 2 in the next 10-15 years. Train is the solution. Transport makes up for 35% of carbon emissions. Modal transport accounts for only 10% of these carbon emissions. Train emits 50% less emissions than cars, and even less than, of course, planes. And air transport. As stated by Vincent a while ago, we are ready and willing to reduce the carbon footprint, and we should increase and highlight railways footprint. Now we are going to turn to the next chapter, so to speak. We have made a global commitment, so how to translate this into daily life?
Yann Leriche. Now, you are at the head of Getlink as a CEO, and for this rail transport market, what about the footprint? What about the small footprint? Carbon footprint is about 40,000 tons of CO2. How can you lessen this particular footprint? Indeed, we do not issue a lot of carbon. However, we want to do our part of the work, and we want to reduce our emissions. What we want to do is something which is very efficient right away, because there's an auto self-destructing spiral. So what we want to do things without thinking about what the future will be in 2050, but we want to do things right now. Because the main topic is how can we possibly reduce our emission right now. So we are looking in practice. We are looking at Eurotunnel. We also are considering the main activity, which is Europort for freights in various countries in Europe. And there we are using various there's no hydrogen solution, so we are using linseed oil and other solutions like that. And which enables us right now to have a solution. We are rolling out our solution and reducing our footprint. And also we are trying to go very quickly in other areas as well. That there should be one railway link between Great Britain and France. And how many trains per day are circulating on that particular line? Well, from 3 to 5. So the tunnel, the Eurotunnel, which is under used, there's about 50% of its use which is not done. So there's about 3 to 5 trains. So that what is the market share relative to the ferries? The tunnel is about 40% of the market share of all the exchanges between Great Britain and France. And if we are considering a larger economic view, it's 25% to feed Great Britain. We are a major economic actor, but it should be done better. And we have an infrastructure which is available right now. So what we want to do is to have more trains or freight trains going through that particular tunnel which is underused. With Marlène Dolveck, we talked about the rail, and the car is not present at this round table, but we have a researcher here who, from TSE, Toulouse School of Economics, whose speciality is to look at all the economic policies or for transport. And as MEDEF was saying, when they were talking about the cost, 78% of the French employees will be using their cars each day to go to work. So how can we possibly think about this particular problematic? How can we play on that? Because the best way to reduce the carbon emissions is to reduce the use of the car. What about the public policies in this domain when it comes to reducing these emissions and the use of cars? Well, yes, I just would like to come back on the key role of the state to reduce the carbon emissions in the field of transport, and more particularly for the individual cars, because these cars are 53% of all emissions in the sector of transport. So the state would like to reduce the emissions. What can be done? Well, you have to distinguish two main categories in this sector. First, make sure that all the cars that are available are less polluting. And this goes through various policies, the purchase of the car, and also to urge people to replace their older cars and to buy a new car. Now, the other way is to make sure that the existing cars are less used. Now, how can we make sure that these cars are less used by the individuals? And there you have various ways of thinking about this. So you have some taxes on the petroleum products, which is going to increase the cost of the car. And also recently we have implemented something else, which are local policies of regulations in terms of traffic. In Toulouse, we have been implementing low emission zones, and this is also occurring in 10 other cities in France, which were restricting the city center to some cars, particularly those that are too old or too polluting. And this is an instrument which makes sure that the emissions will be lower. What about your research? Does it say that? Does it give you the most efficient way? What is the role of the economist in order to help to make sure that the state and the public state would implement the right policies? So the economist is doing some public policy validation, looking at measuring the impact of the policies that have been selected. And when you are talking about this, we can often think about that is just measuring the impact of the policy on the objective, like the emissions here by the cars, but it's not only that. Evaluating the public policies, we can also do other things, like comparing various policies, public policies. We chose a bonus or malus policy in France, but we could have provided some incentives for purchasing the cars. What would have been the impact of these various solutions? This is what we do, and the important thing, which is evaluating and to go beyond the global effect of the policies on the population and get interested in the, in other words, what is more efficient? This would be my question. Well, it all depends on what you want to reach. You can reduce the carbon footprint Well, many instruments are available to measure this, and what we should do to determine which instrument is preferable. What is the objective? Well, what would you advise Mr. Moudin to do? Well, I would advise him to do what I'm saying, is to get interested in going further and looking at those populations that are affected by this policy and trying to know who is going to be penalized and making sure that this could be compensated. Right. So the company has got to make decisions, and so at the time when you are implementing these modifications, you talked about the immediate action that can be obtained on vehicles. What about the commitments? What is most important in terms of reducing by 30% all the emissions by the year 2030? Well, each company has got its own profile, and in 88% of all emissions are due to Scope 3. So when I'm detailing Scope 3, what is it? Well, these are the emissions that are produced by your own suppliers and vendors, or customers rather. And in Scope 3, we have 80% are due to transport. So our attention is laid on the raw materials we are using. These are the packagings. This is why, and what we have done, we have empowered all our researchers, 1,000 researchers, 2/3 of them in Toulouse. We have empowered them with instruments, allowing them to note whenever they are progressing in a formula, in a packaging, what is going to be the carbon impact of the products that they are developing. And this also enables this to be transparent for the consumers. And as nothing exists in the terms of cosmetics, Pierre Fabre took the initiative in 2021 with EFNOR to have a quotation evaluating us always in terms of transparency and honesty of the certification. And so each consumer of a Pierre Fabre product, Aven, Chlorane, Furterer, will be able to see what is the impact, and also will see the impact of the product that is buying and relative to the carbon footprint, and also the societal impact. And it's a very simple way, and to know. And also we have some societal criteria. The societal criteria is to take into account, for example, when we are using natural assets. As I said before, it's important that all those do not come from France or Europe. So we have to see what is the impact on the population in terms of the production of these active principles, and also to support the populations towards a more virtuous production, so that the extraction of the active principle should not be done by using fossil energy, but by using electric energy. So we are creating the solar furnace for that. This is a way towards progress, and we have 2007 references like that in our portfolio. It's a very long process, and as the students were saying, we can wonder about the trajectory. What about 2030? Is it the right trajectory for that date? This is what has been officially laid, and this is what we are trying to follow. But we have humbly to recognize that we have to deploy many things, and that science is evolving, and you have also to adapt yourselves, because you are knowing you have to adapt permanently in order to progress. Philippe Ducom, how can you make sure? I was listening to you when you were detailing this. Could you please tell us about the attack which was made on the strategies that for capturing carbon? Because apparently, from what we have said, it's a very important element in the solution. It would be possible, for example, thanks to this technique, in the Gulf of Mexico, to get to capture emissions which would be that comparable to that of Belgium. So this is not experimenting only. How do you manage that, particularly on this aspect which has been criticized? Well, I think that this is a topic which we have heard. There's not one miracle solution to the climate risk. There are a good number of solutions that can be implemented with its own value, and the solutions that we are trying to promote and on which we are working, on which our new branch We are investing $15 billion of dollars on that. Will be the capturing CO2. Hydrogen will be a solution, and CO2 capture. So in terms of capturing carbon, first of all, we are not saying that ourselves, because if you look at the GIEC report, and if you also look at all the analysis of the International Agency for Energy, they are all saying that the capturing of CO2 and carbon is part of the solution, will be necessary, and they even say that this is a solution which will be essential to reach the objective of net zero carbon. So what about this capture of CO2? It's to extract the CO2 from the combustion or from the production in the cement works or in the steel works, and you extract it, you concentrate it, and you transport it, you store it in deep geological structures in a very sustainable way. It's a technology which has been already operated for years, and we are the leader in this particular technology. We have an ability to store 9 billion tons per year of CO2. Ever since we have already stored 120 million tons. It's about 40% of all the CO2 which has been stored with this technology. So what is important that it's to look at its potential, because it can be used more widely, but it needs the support of the public policies, and also with the price of carbon, which was very much elevated than what we know now. But still, in the example that you are mentioning, and we talked about it earlier on, the Houston project proposed to the Biden administration was to capture and store 100 million tons per year of CO2 at the horizon 2040. Now, we have 14 partners operating with us. We are working with the city of Houston, and there are local partnerships. There's the city of Texas, there's the federal state as well. And what has to be understood that not only does it represent 100 million tons per year, which is like the emissions of Belgium, we have the ability to store CO2 in the Gulf of Mexico, which is about 500 billion tons. So you have to understand that in order to progress in the reduction of emissions, you have to figure it out in billions of tons of CO2. This is the unit we are using, because it's 50 billion tons per year at the world level. So you have to develop these solutions. You have to propose them, technically speaking. You have to reduce their cost, and also work with the states. We also have projects in Europe, which are smaller because the collective emissions are smaller as well. But we are working in France, in the Seine River, in Belgium, in Holland, in England as well. And there's there is an interest. It's a solution which is available and which could be implemented industrially speaking. And it also gives us a potential for the future to create some emissions which would be negative. So we would reduce it, and in conjunction with the use of bio-sourced materials. So this is what we know how to do this. This our know-how, and we want to propose it to the governments. Marlène Dolveck, how do you manage for your 50 million tons or 15 millions per year of people? How do you make sure that they would like to come and feel more comfortable? First of all, I think we have to say how should we give want people? How should we make sure that we reduce the carbon footprint? So we have an infrastructure, which is a rail infrastructure, which is going to activate the responsible mobility, first through energy, the eco-conception, and intermodality. When 10 million square meters in terms of energy, we have to reduce our consumption of energy. We have already stopped all the boilers, fuel boilers, and we are also reducing. We are no longer air conditioning our structures or our premises and our offices. But then beyond the reduction as well, we spend a long time looking at the energy mix, which is nuclear and renewable energy, and we are also pushing the renewable energy, because in our new plan we are going to install 1.1 million photovoltaic cell, equivalent to 50,000 households consumption. So this is self-consumption for our 3,000 railway stations. I know it's a complicated plan to implement, but we are doing it, and we have just launched a first call for interest with the industrialists. So this is the energy in terms of sobriety and the creation of energy through renewable energies. Now, the second sector our plan is the so-called eco-conception, because we are managing some infrastructures and we are working on the eco-design or eco-conception. How can we make sure that all the machines on our fields are net zero carbon? And then eco-conception for us means the energy, matter, carbon, climate and biodiversity, and we are working with our own architects to make sure that each of our projects are really complying with these various criteria, like replanting the trees or using certain types of wood or cement or concrete, and considering the biodiversity in our railway stations, the way we position the shelters on the roof of our stations, if it's too hot, and to make sure it's not too hot within the premises. And so we have a real thinking about the waste as well in terms of eco-conception, because we want to have 100% of our waste recycled by the year 2030, and 100% of our waste are recycled on our fields, on our working fields. And the third aspect is the intermodality in a soft manner, because Mr. Moudak, the mayor of Toulouse, was talking about an additional line of to reach the railway station in Toulouse, and all these means will help us to reach the so-called soft intermodality around the railway station. And we're also talking about bikes, because we are going to have additional biking parkings, and we are not in Amsterdam or in Ghent or in Belgium or Amsterdam, because there you can see an incredible amount of bikes that are stored and parked, but we are not using the bikes as much as they are. But then we have this ambition, and also we talked about sobriety and renewable energy, and I'd like to be positive in this field. And we have decided for our French railway stations to work with industrialists in order to have some recharging terminals in our stations. I think that if I look at my GPS, and I will know exactly where I can recharge my electric battery, because because you know that the trains are electrified. We have the catenaires. This is the right way to bring these electric cars, in order to recharge their batteries. And this is the very positive aspect of the plant, which is innovating and recent. Well, there's a problem, however, because if you leave your car to be recharged, and then you're going to occupy the place if you are stepping into the train. How do you? Well, we are working with an industrialist on that particular issue, but then the more questions you ask, the less you do. So you have to, you can say it's very complicated, but then, of course, you can see that the recharging terminals are not available. And so one of the first plan is to have the electric plan. This is what has been said. In my own plan, I'm doing what the French president has been saying. And I know it's not going to be simple, but I'll try to do it. Well, for the 10 remaining minutes, I'd like us to be realistic, and you showed us what you are doing and what you are having as projects. But then, can we say that still we have some difficulties in terms of funding and in terms of technology-wise? You were talking about hydrogen a minute ago, and hydrogen is perfect for the train, but what about locomotives using hydrogen? Do you think this is feasible? Can you use them? What about the technological barrier? How do you consider all this? Indeed, all technologies are not mature, particularly in terms of freight trains. And we haven't got the power or the materials. We only have traditional materials. But in fact, I'd like to stop at that. I want to be disruptive, and I'd like to look at the questions Eric Durrmeyer asked about the transport, because we are transporting cars, so our ecosystem is part of that. And we have the conviction that the toolbox in order to do modal transport is known, because if you want to manage successfully the climate transition, there are 4 tools, and it's very easy to remember because it's green. We need visibility to do that in terms of a carbon price. If you go far in the suburbs, you will have a dwelling which is less expensive, but then transport will be more expensive. So if we knew that progressively the cost of petrol would be increasing, we would have an informed choice, which we cannot do it today because the price of carbon is moving up and down. And so when the economy starts saying that you have to tax carbon, then all of a sudden it's a catastrophe. It is not working. So this is the first point. Efficiency now. We said that the transition, energy transition has a cost, and if it is not done well, the cost will be so elevated that we won't be able to pay for it. And I'd like to come back on some orders of magnitudes, and the subsidies for the electric field is just like valuing the ton of carbon at 700 euros. Is that reasonable? This is a true question. 10 times more than the market as of now. Third tool, redistribution, because if you tax carbon, you collect monies, and this money has got to be redistributed in a transition phase, and there are losers and winners, and if you do not help those who are in difficult situations during this transition, it won't be good, and there's a social transition there, which is important to take into account. And then fourthly, you have timing, because CO2 is going to remain in the atmosphere for more than 100 years. There's a storage issue. There's about 730 gigatons remaining, so you have to find the right solution. So yeah, you need visibility, efficiency, redistribution, and timing. Now the real question is, how can we possibly collectively, as a policy, have the right visibility? How can we be efficient? This is our own subject with TSE. Eric Ducournau, what is your main obstacle in terms of what you are trying to do at the moment? And no, we won't be able to do it. At a certain point in time, we'll have to recapture carbon to be net zero carbon. What is the limit at the point of which we can no longer do it? Well, we have a technology limit.
I think that the technology has evolved a lot. We cannot work on our own. We're working with many companies, Carbon4, etc. They are really helping us in our approach to carry out calculations. We need to be able to calculate what are the effects and what we can resolve, and then try to be really acquiring biotechnology to achieve our objectives. So carbon captation is probably necessary at a point. I can't say today whether it will be a reduction of 50% of all general emissions. How are we going to do? How are we going to evolve with the deadlines that we all have in mind? So we need to put ourselves in a position to really do the maximum, and captation should really be the last solution, really, to be able to put the last stone on the building. And there's one thing that we need to do is to start quoting the cost of the ton within the company, and we're exploiting certain brands. Head of product, when they work on a brand, he should really associate the cost of his carbon impact associated on the product he or she produces, and there he can improve the production line. That there will be a virtuous circle. We don't work on our own. We need to work with other people. We need to publish our results, make them really transparent with the consumer. And so, thanks to this taxation system, when I read Christian Gaulier again, what we need to do is to make sure that we all embark onto the productive process, because the impact is renewed, is every day on all trades, and I think it is the only solution. Then, Mr. Lois, you were talking about Leriche, we were talking about taxation from public policies. But if within the companies we don't get into this virtuous circle, we don't do our job. And our job is really to take into account this subject, to really address it, and to take our part. Philippe Ducom, with his wonderful ambition to be carbon neutral in 2050, Philippe Ducom, what is your problem regarding certain other collective? I wanted to really speak about it from a global perspective. I want to know how you're going to approach, how are you going to go about it. Efficiencies and to be efficacy always works. All companies all start like this. We have many opportunities also to reduce fugitive emissions. It's something that we have committed to 2030. Then we have the electrification, change engines that work with electrical engines and have green electricity to feed these electrical engines. So we still have lots of sources and resources, hydrogen, carbon captation, etc. And then every time we find a problem that even if the technological progress are there and the solution is there, it's $700 per ton, 250, it's too much. Company today doesn't take into account this cost of carbon. So this discussion of carbon tax and redistribution of carbon taxes so that us industrial could reinvest in profitable projects that will reduce carbon footprint. Well, we can't at the moment because there's a problem of speed, but also how does it do it with us? There's a report that is very important. The International Energy Agency published its net zero report 2050, and they follow the progress of 40 solutions every year. Of the 46, only 2 are in line with the objectives, electrical cars and lightning. For the 44 others, we're either not online or we are completely too expensive. So that is the real point of developing, like with solar energy, creating an environment that will allow us to invest in scaling, to reduce solution costs, so that it is affordable and that society can pay it in terms of decarbonating systems. We need to stop now, but I wanted to ask you if the main difficulty wasn't the weight of habit and facility. The car is really very, very practical as a tool. How do you fight psychologically against this main difficulty? Yes, of course, it is a real challenge, but we should be made aware of all the challenges and create soft mobilities. Beyond this, the heart of the problem about all the issues we have tackled, it's money. Really, it's all down to cost. What is the level of investment we're going to be able to put to regenerate rail transportation, to regenerate this so that we can multiply by 2 this modal part for rail? You need money, you need financing, public financing, cooperation with private public is the problem of the prisoner beyond the climate, and then planification, because no, it's not easy, I agree. We'll need to really implement changes and transformations, but you need to plan those changes. And if there is a planning, ecological planning, in a sober manner and with growth, then it works. And I'm really convinced about those 3 topics. This session is now finished, and the next session is about mixing ecology, carbon tax, and growth, economic growth. And we're going to have the best specialist, Christian Gaulier, who is going to join us with Guylaine Ottenheimer, and they are guests. So thank you very much for taking part into this session that was really passionate.